Hey Heidi, you are good to go whenever. I have eScribe running and we're live on YouTube.
Awesome, thank you. I think I have, my clock says we have 1 more minute, so I'll wait for a second. If you want to put up that slide of how people can join remotely while we're waiting, that might be, we can do that, it might be useful.
Sure.
Are you in charge of all the committees today, Heidi?
Nope, I think this is the last one, and thankfully it's just an informational item.
You're doing a great job.
All right, so I believe it's 11:50, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. We are still meeting virtually, and I hope that folks have figured out how to join us since we have been meeting virtually for 2 years now. So we'll go ahead and take roll call, and you can stop sharing the screen now so we can see each other. All right, thank you.
Anderson. Absent. Becerra.
Present.
Carlino.
Present.
Contos.
Here.
Hess is absent. Jones. Absent.
Absent, yeah.
Jordan. Absent. Nugent.
Present.
Savage.
Present.
Cheryl.
Present.
Basika.
Present.
And West.
Present.
All right, we have 8 present, so we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so the first item of business is to approve the minutes from April 6th. Without any objections, those will be approved. And we have 2 people present in our attendees group. If you would like to provide public comment on items not on the agenda, this would be the opportunity to do so. So if you would like to do that, raise your hand. But I would assume based on the names that they are here for our agenda item. And I am not seeing any hands go up, so we'll move on to our one item of committee business today, which is an pre-public hearing informational item. So Monday night, this item was included in our consent agenda to set a public hearing for April 18th, 2022. And Lauren Stevens is here to present on this item, and I'll turn the meeting over to her.
Thank you. Yeah, so this will be, you'll see this presentation again on Monday, the 18th. It will be going to also for final consideration on that day. Are you seeing my presentation page?
Yes, yeah.
Great, okay. Cannot tell where I'm sharing. Okay, so this is the Remington Flats subdivision phased development review for phases 2 and 3. So first I'll give a little overview of that project and then kind of talk about what phased development review really is, because it's a relatively new thing. And then go into staff's recommended amendments to findings of fact and conditions of approval. So let's see, Remington Flats Subdivisions located in the Subdivision area north of 44 Ranch and west of the McNett Flats subdivision. And it was granted preliminary plat approval on October 19th of 2020 with 7 approved phases. So the subdivision will contain 152 lots on just over 20 acres, and it is zoned RT 5.4 with the Remington Flats neighborhood character overlay. Please note on this slide, Chuckwagon Drive here and George Elmer Drive. We'll be discussing those a bit more later. They're both designated as collector streets, which are meant to handle higher traffic levels than local streets. All right, so this phase development review is for phase 2, shown in this salmon color, and phase 3, shown in yellow. These phases include an extension of Riata Road and construction of the new Ruger Road, both of which will connect to the future east-west Winchester Drive. Phase 2 contains 22 lots, and phase 3 includes 20 lots. Phase 1 has already gone through phase development review and is in the process of submitting for their final plat review at this time. And then please note these phasing deadlines just for reference a little bit later. All right, so what is phase development review? So it's a relatively new process that's mandated through state law that requires the governing body, City Council, to hold a public hearing and conduct a review prior to the applicant's ability to submit for final plat review. So in this review, the goal is to determine if there are any changed subdivision primary review criteria impacts or new information that exists, which would result in significant adverse impacts with the phase or phases under review that was not known at the time of preliminary plat approval. Staff is recommending several amendments to the original findings of fact and conditions of approval, and council may choose to approve this phase development review with some or all of those, with added conditions or with the original conditions. So it's not able to, you can't deny a phase development review. It's either with the original conditions, new, or the amended ones. So to better visualize this, I included this graphic here. So subdivisions begin in the scoping and pre-application phase, where they receive required codes and regulations from various city departments and incorporate those into their preliminary plat application. And so at that time we review and the council either approves with conditions, or denies those. Then at phase development review, we review the previous approval to ensure that it's still valid and make any changes if there are those new primary review criteria impacts or new information. And then any approved amendments to the findings of fact are then used for the review of subsequent phases of the subdivision. So after this review, they are then able to submit for their final plat, where we just ensure that everything there matches up with the previous approval and everything. So changed primary review criteria and new information may become more likely as time passes between the preliminary plat approval and the phased review. This can be due to a variety of reasons, like changed city regulations, updated floodplain maps, that sort of information. So as we saw from the phasing plan on the previous slide, these have been submitted several years prior to the deadline for those phases. So there hasn't been a lot of time for those changes to occur. And just for your reference, the city's subdivision regulations include review of the following impacts from a proposed subdivision, which are derived from the Montana Subdivision and Platting Act. So these are the categories that you'll find within the staff report that was attached. And also for reference, I've included the proposed plat for phases 2 and 3 here. Okay. So now we'll just dive into the review portion. So the applicant is not proposing any changes to phase 2 or 3 as they were approved at preliminary plat, nor are they proposing changes to that phasing plan that was approved. So staff sent a request for agency comment on March 22nd and sent notice for the public hearing and request for public comment on March 25th to adjacent neighbors, as well as publishing legal ads in the Missoulian. No concerns were expressed from staff regarding changed impacts to sewer, water, parks, or the other relevant agencies that were noticed, aside from the ones I'll speak about shortly. And no public comment has been received to date. Staff did review the following agency comments, which have been incorporated into the staff report. So the City County Health Department and Stormwater Utility staff both expressed that air quality and stormwater complaints have been submitted in this area, potentially due to mass site grading of this and other parcels nearby. Health Department and Stormwater Utility staff will work with the subdivider to inform them of best practices to mitigate these effects, and will monitor and enforce those regulations if violations occur. And city engineering staff provided comment regarding updated information about infrastructure funding and installation in this area. And these comments have been included in the recommended amendments that I'll discuss shortly. I just have these in the order that they were shown in the staff report. But the first recommended amendment is for condition of approval number 11, which provides the approved standards for the streets within the subdivision, which are classified as low-density urban local streets, as they were modified by the approved subdivision variance request at the time of preliminary plat. Staff recommends the inclusion of Ruger Road, which was inadvertently omitted at the time of preliminary plat approval, but is also planned to meet these same standards. So staff recommends finding of fact number 11 under transportation and drainage from the preliminary plat approval letter, which was included in the documents for this project, be amended to include new information regarding the construction of Chuckwagon Drive, which is intended to be completed with phase 12 of the 44 Ranch subdivision through an improvements agreement. Construction of this section of Chuckwagon Drive would no longer be the responsibility of this applicant, but the amendment would still require these improvements if they're not completed by others for unforeseen reasons. Staff recommends amending finding of fact number 2 under transportation and drainage to include new information about progress on this project's completion. And staff recommends updating finding of fact 13 under transportation and drainage to reflect new information about the timing of George Elmer Drive and Mullen Road's intersection improvements being done through the Mullen Build Grant. Engineering staff also advised that transportation impact fees have been adopted as one of the cost recovery methods for portions not covered by that build grant. City of Missoula subdivision regulations require that this statement be shown on the face of each plat and each instrument of conveyance. The purpose of an SID or an RSID is to allow for future maintenance and upgrades of streets that serve the subdivision, paid for by those who benefit from those upgrades the most. As noted earlier, Chuckwagon Drive and George Elmer Drive are main north-south thoroughfares serving this and other developments in the area, and they will be undergoing improvements as this area continues to grow. George Elmer is partially funded through the build grant, but Chuckwagon Drive is not a build grant project. So costs for improvements may need to be partially recovered through an SID, RSID at a point in the future. This is reflected in finding of fact number 14 under transportation and drainage in the preliminary plat approval letter. This recommended amendment to finding of fact number 1 under water system and sewer system is due to resolution 8468, which was adopted by City Council on November 9th of 2020, which renamed the Missoula Wastewater Facility Service Area to the Missoula Utility Service Area. And not for today, but for the public hearing, staff's recommended motion is for approval of phases 2 and 3 based on the amended findings of fact and subject to the amended conditions of approval within the staff report. And that was kind of a lot of information, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Lauren. I think, let's see, Amber has her hand raised. So Amber, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I'm just, so the complaints that came to the health board with regard to air quality, could you, I have a guess of what those probably were, having received some emails over the last year. So could you speak to those a little more? And maybe one of the things that has come up in another project that we're looking at is the difference in soil composition in different areas of town and need for maybe dust abatement or whatever it may. Could you just kind of speak to that? It's something that has been on my mind since we approved the other project.
Yeah, so Tracy Campbell from the Stormwater Utility and Ben Schmidt at City County Health Department reached out, and they didn't necessarily elaborate. They just said there have been complaints in this area due to they suspect the mass grading of essentially opening up the whole subdivision while not building out the whole subdivision for several projects in the area. And that this clay soil is particularly prone to that dust that can be disturbed easily. I don't have any verified violations by this or any other project in the area handy or anything like that. So as far as we kind of looked at this for our review, there wasn't necessarily new information to add additional conditions. They are still required to meet city, stormwater plan conditions and things through engineering. Yeah, but.
Thank you, Lauren. And I was wondering, do any of the folks in attendance, does the developer or representatives of the developer have additional information to add to your presentation? Do you know?
They didn't say anything about any presentation.
Okay.
I believe they're just here as needed for questions.
Perfect. All right, then we'll just keep going with questions. Mirta? Oh, and if you want to maybe stop sharing your screen just so it's easier to see everyone that's participating.
How do I do this? Let's see. Oh, there it is. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So Mirta, go ahead.
Thank you. And I guess my question was along the same lines as Amber's question, that I'm fully aware that there's been some violations, but definitely some complaints about dust in this area because of the soil composition. I know that for another project, the suggestion was to monitor this with particular matter monitoring devices and increasing the number of regulations that are in place for when mass grading happens and trucks go in and out of the site, and they take a lot of dust and mud out from the site. And I'm just wondering if we know that this is true, not necessarily the complaints and the violations. I'm not sure that they're linked to this project specifically, but they are to other ones. But knowing that this area is prone to this issue and that this is a likely thing to happen, could the recommendation from staff result in a condition, an added condition to this? Because it is new information. Now we know that this area is prone to have these issues, I guess, with dust and air quality. So I'm just wondering if that is considered new information and enough to warrant an additional condition of approval, just to be proactive and not have a lot of complaints and potential violations in the future.
I might refer to Dave for that question.
Sure, I can address that. I think it's possible, Mirta. I think City Council could apply a condition addressing air quality, and I think we'd also have to try to come up with some sort of a finding to support it. And so we would probably, if directed by council, we could draft a memo and work with our Public Works Mobility staff to understand a little bit better what the rules are, how they might be enforced, and those sorts of things. What I took from Andy Schultz, who spoke to the Land Use Planning Committee last week, he does stormwater design and enforcement and things like that in the Public Works and Mobility Department. He indicated, I think, that we have the tools to address air quality and sedimentation and things like that, stormwater issues. He said, I think, if I remember right, that city staff had been kind of getting up to speed, or maybe hadn't done as much enforcement as they might otherwise, but it seemed like it was on their radar now. So, but I could certainly touch base with him, or Lauren and I can, and we can report back to you on at the public hearing And then if it seems like, or we could also draft a condition and a finding as well, if that's something you'd like.
I see that in the attendees list, we have some hands up from the, I think the developers representative. So I would assume it's on this subject. So I will go ahead and let them maybe answer this question as well. And I don't know who the first person is. So it's just a phone number ending in 391. Let me see. I don't actually know. Do you know how do they unmute themselves? Just *8 if it's a phone number? Yes. Okay. So if you could push *8 and then we can hear you.
Correction.
Or *9. Sorry, it's *9. Bad instructions on my part. See, and then I also saw that Brian from 406 Engineering also has their hand raised. So if you want to, maybe while we figure out how to unmute, we can go ahead and take your answer to this question. And
Madam Chair, don't we need to move them into the meeting for them to be able to?
and I can't do it because I'm not a host. I am realizing. So if Amanda, could you?
That is my bad. I'm gonna.
That's okay. I'm like clicking on things and nothing's happening.
I'm gonna promote Brian to a panelist since he is.
Perfect, thank you.
And I will make you co-host in the meantime.
Yeah, and if we can,
Hi guys, can you hear me?
yes, now we
Okay,
can.
Perfect. So yeah, real quick on the dust abatement. We realize there's some issues out there. I can share a picture with you guys. I think most of the complaints were probably next door to us. You know, we had our phase 1, so our little strip at the bottom, we did uncover that. We put a ton of water on it, but next door they scraped 20 acres in one fell swoop. And in doing so, you just can't keep up. So, I mean, if you want to, we were out there one day and took a picture of just what it really was. And you can see kind of the line at the edge of our property where we've had water, and next door is just a big dust bowl. Part of ours is we're uncovering little bits at a time. So that will help a bunch. And we'll continue to do that. And to be honest, some of the fastest way to get rid of the dust is let's put houses on them. I mean, the faster we can get through final plat and we can get houses and get lawns and get it done, we'll get rid of dust. So.
All right, thank you. And I see the phone number is still has their hands raised, and I now have the ability to allow you to talk. So I'll go ahead and unmute you, and if you have anything to add or allow you into the meeting. So if you have anything to add, please do so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for doing that. I'm actually a member of the public. Is this an appropriate time to ask a question?
I think let's hold off until we have these questions taken or people that are on the committee, and then we'll go to public comments after the questions are asked. So we'll come back to you. Stick tight. All right, Mirta, do you have another question?
Just to follow up on the same thing, and I completely agree with forgot your name, Brian, that these are complaints that I think were mostly driven by the construction taking place next to where this is. And mostly I think I think we should start being proactive and preventative. So it's not in direct response to this development, but rather I think we should just be putting in place stronger language perhaps in our conditions, and being able to enforce and be provided with the mass grading facing schedule so that we know when they're going to happen and our staff can better track and regulate and enforce the condition. Because right now, I think that sometimes these facing schedules get a little bit blurry or are not being tracked as closely as they should be to prevent issues of air quality. So if possible, Lauren and Dave, if we could find out just a little bit more in terms of what could we do if there's stronger language or additional language that would require better coordination of those mass grading phases and the schedule, I think that would prompt staff to go out and enforce the regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirta. Amber?
Yeah, thanks. Mirta kind of covered what I was going to say, I think a little bit, but Dave, I like that idea of looking into this. That area is going to see a lot of development under our current plan, which is great, but also brings problems given the composition of the soil. So I think we really need to be proactive in this because now we know what we know, and we should be able to be proactive and preventative, as Mirta said. I'm particularly worried for this area, and kind of obviously it all blows around when there's wind. But if we think about what fire season could potentially look like, if we have dense smoke and a lot of dust in that area, I mean that becomes a major health issue for people living within the area the dust is blowing. So I'm not particularly worried right now about this project, and I do agree with Brian, like doing the smaller sections as they're doing it, it's going to make a difference. But I want us to, I guess, I don't know if we vote to have them do this or whatever, but I really would like to see, this is going to keep coming up. And so I would like to see something dealing with air quality as we develop this Subdivision area.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not sure, I don't think we need a vote. I think we can just direct staff to explore drafting some language, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
So just for clarification, are you looking for a condition and finding added to this project, or would you like to include, so the Public Works and Mobility Department, they're the ones that work on stormwater, and City County Health Department work on air quality. Are you just looking for more information, or would like to give them a heads up that you'd like to see them a little bit more active? Or I guess I'm just wondering exactly what the ask is.
Mirta?
I was thinking that even though, like I said, the complaints that we have received are not directly linked to this proposed development, that it would be a preventative measure starting with this development and forward to have really clear language and stronger language about how we can best control and enforce issues of air quality and stormwater.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of development in this area, and we know it's prone to air quality issues with just the soil. So I think it would be great to have something that applies to this and, future reviews as they arise. Mike?
Thanks. I think it's an interesting conversation. I think that getting something so that we can be consistent about it and not feel like we're kind of doing something midstream, which just feels like is important, but I support the bigger concept. I would be curious, one thing Mirta mentioned was a schedule or a timeline on the grading. And my experience on some of these projects is that sometimes workers show up when they show up. So I would just be curious if Brian or somebody from the project could weigh in on if that's a realistic request or something that would be difficult to work with.
Brian, do you want to respond to that? Your hand is up already. So
Yeah, on a couple of things. So yeah, for that, it would be hard, like on a intimate. I mean, we definitely put together project schedules, right? It's like over weeks, months. But if you truly want hours to days, that we can't do that. The other thing on adding that as a condition of approval, the condition would have to be on a rule that we need to meet. I don't think you can add rules to the conditions. So you would have to go through how Public Works create rules that then we have to adopt as a condition. So just putting that on our subdivision, you can't really do that right now. But Public Works can definitely create an air quality rule that applies to the county or the city to all projects. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where you would have to go.
Yeah, I think what we could do as well, the first step is to find out exactly what the rules in place today are and how those are enforced. And so if we were to add a condition, it would have to be, as Brian said, it would have to be based on an existing rule. It's not something that we could just kind of whip up out of thin air. So I think that's Lauren's and my job, is to try to figure out what the rules are and how they can be best applied, or in this case.
and just to add to that, I assume that many of these air quality and water quality rules might be triggered at building permits time versus this. And so I think it would be useful, even just as a follow-up, to know if they're not triggered now when they are triggered. Just because I know especially water protection mitigation measures are required, but it just might not be that at this level of review. So I think that would be helpful for context. Amber?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I wasn't speaking to this particular project because I do have, changing things midstream. I don't know what we're allowed to do or not allowed to do exactly in there, but changing thing midstream is like changing the goalpost. And I don't think that's the right way to be doing development. And the schedule of grading, I guess, doesn't concern me as much as having some way to have some standard for air quality during, and I don't, that would have to be that probably does mean that you can't get all the contractors out there at the same time doing whatever they're doing. I don't really know. I have nothing to do with building, but whatever that is, that is a public health issue if we need to be able to monitor air quality for people in that area. And so I don't know if that's a combination of health department or Public Works. David, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of I'm throwing my concern out there, and I don't know what the answer to it is, but I think it's a real one. And I think it's a real one for people that are living and building in this area. And they're going to, as we build that area out, there are going to be more and more and more people affected by it. So I don't know what that standard should be. And I'm sorry that I can't give you more direction than I want air quality monitored as people are living out there. And we're building in maybe lots of different sites, right? I mean, if we're building it out as fast as we can, which really kind of would be our goal, they may have it coming in from lots of different directions. So those are the concerns that I want to figure out a way to address, not on this project specifically.
Thank you. Mirta?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that my intent is not to make this project, get it delayed or more complicated. I think we all know we need to get this going. I think Brian's absolutely right that putting more houses on it, or, the sooner we can do that, that's how you can not have so much dust everywhere. So I completely agree. I just, like Amber, I just want to find a proactive solution to a problem that we know exists. It's not necessarily triggered by this development, but we know it's going to happen because of soil composition quality. It's a really open area with no way to trap any of this air. And I know that there are ways to at least monitor air quality that might prompt that staff to go out there and do a, apologies, to do some sort of enforcement of the regulations, and just, you know, with the mass grading schedule is just more of a coordination. I don't think any of us expect it to be down to the minute to know when the workers are down on the site doing their work, but, you know, at least some sort of window of opportunity for staff to be ensuring that the regulations are being followed, and we're not going to get complaints, and that will ultimately turn into, you know, infractions or the workers not following the regulations that we have in place. So anything that can be done to be proactive is, I think, all I'm trying to get at.
Brian?
Yeah, you know, one thing I think I'd encourage you guys, we have a state SWIP and a city SWIP. So, and they're part of those rules are dust control. So I think you guys have the rules in place. It's just more of an enforcement issue. So I don't want you to have to go through a whole process to create rules when you already have them. And so you may look into those to see what kind of teeth you have based on your current permits that are already pulled and rules and plans that are in place, versus trying to reinvent the wheel on the whole thing. Is just a quick suggestion from my point. So.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And I think the SWIP came up during our last discussion around the Greeno subdivision as well. Does anybody else have any questions that are specific to the phase 2 and phase 3 of this project? I'm not seeing any hands go up, so let's go ahead and move to public comment. So I don't know your name. So the number ending with 391, if you would like to comment on this agenda item, this is your opportunity to. And we don't usually engage in a back and forth but somebody on the committee can address, pass your question on, or get it answered by staff, just for context.
Sure, thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Seamus Land, Ward 3. I just wanted to comment here at this meeting. I have a lot of interest also in the area through my graduate student research, and I'm also just trying to put the pieces together. And I understand this is midstream, but I just really wanted to push you or push somebody to help me understand where this recently phrased climate lens would fit into a project like this, you know, at least to help me understand where I can best put my efforts in terms of timing. I know midstream, I know we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but this is just such an existential threat and such a real thing that I'm still not understanding how it's touching down, especially in projects like this where, you know, for example, the air quality and dust aspect. It's just important to note that this is land that has a lot of carbon sequestration capacity. You know, when we're developing these places, I'm not hearing anything really about carbon either on the front end, middle end, or back end. You know, and so just I'd like somebody, if possible, to help me understand how this climate lens from the new climate inventory and all that fits into this project like this, so I can better comment in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Amber, I see your hands raised, and then I can address some of that question as well. But Amber, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll do the part that I was thinking about. I appreciate the question, Seamus. I just wanted to say that we are currently developing that climate lens. So it's not something that has come to us yet. It is, as most things you can imagine, is way more complicated to figure out what that lens needs to be than just saying we think about climate when we look through, then when we look at any one project or any one purchase. So, and I think that will make it better. So I think that's the right way to do it. As I have said, it can come down to the climate lens could be as much as where do we get the bolts from, you know, that we use, where do we, you know, I mean, it's the climate lens is complex. I think we're making headway on it, but that is not done yet. And I just want to I want that to be out there. And do you want, I guess, Heidi, maybe you should cover the other piece of it.
Yeah, all that I was going to add is that I think, and I was looking back, so many things have happened in the last 2 years. I believe this one was still approved under Title 19 and not the new master plan form-based code for that area. Is that correct? Or
It was approved under Title 20, but not the
Title 20?
Subdivision
Sorry,
master
that's what I
plan.
meant.
Yeah.
Is Title 20 and not the new the newer plan for this area. So the existing rules, I would say, don't have a close focus on that climate lens, but we are kicking off a process to better integrate, I think, all of these things in our community with the Unified Development Ordinance. And I think that would be a great place to engage so that future projects do meet those goals, because we all know most of our carbon is stored in our topsoil. So it is an important issue. So does anyone else, I think we have 5 more minutes. Does anyone else have questions on this particular project prior to our public hearing, or anything else that you want more information on at the public, in the interim? I am not seeing hands coming up. So I think with that, if there's any additional questions between now and then, Lauren, I think you can email them to Lauren and Dave and Jordan and myself if you would like to, and we'll make sure that all of the issues are addressed during the public meeting. So which is going to be on April 18th, Monday night. So and if we have no other questions, this is an information only item, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.